In an era of dishonesty, there is one X11 window manager that continues to flourish. The final frontier of honesty. The last pillar of hope in an unsettling ecosystem, where windows are no longer managed by human users, but by committees, protocols, and corporations. For nearly 20 years, this window manager has been battle-tested. It has shined through the smoke of the AUR DDoS attacks, survived endless attempts to force Wayland adoption by Red Hat and Canonical, and relentlessly survived waves of dishonest, modern UX improvements designed to undermine your ability to simply move a window 1 pixel to the left. At the end of the day, that's all an X11 window manager was ever supposed to be. And XMonad is, as somebody like Utux might put it, the last honest window manager. What's up guys, my name is Tony, and today I'm going to give you a quick and painless guide on installing and configuring XMonad. So let's jump straight into the installation. Today we're going to be using NixOS for the installation and configuration, but XMonad is available on virtually every package manager in existence, at least all the honest ones. If you're using a legacy distribution such as Arch, Gentoo, or Debian, I will provide a link below the subscribe button for a written guide to accompany this video. Alright, let's jump into our configuration.nix and begin the installation process. So on my setup, I do have Flakes and Home Manager enabled, but with this setup today, you won't be needing Home Manager or Flakes. You can do this just straight up with a vanilla NixOS, if you will. So let's jump into that config file, configuration.nix. So first we need to ensure we have a display manager enabled. I've got Lie enabled. You can choose SDDM or LightDM or whatever your favorite display manager is. And for this tutorial, I'm not going to go into PyCom, but I do have it enabled here. That's going to cover a lot of the animations. So all we need to do is add XMonad to our window manager set here. And we need to ensure that enable contrib and extras is true. Now, this will look a little bit more verbose if you're only using one window manager. I have DWM here enabled as well, so I have these all defined in a nested set. But it would look like this to type it out fully. Services.xserver.windowmanager.xmonad.enable equals true there. And then enable contrib and extras also equals true. So you just need these two lines somewhere in your NixOS configuration file. And like I said, the way I'm going to do that is to simply put XMonad as its own set here within Window Manager and define these attributes enable and enable contrib and extras as true within the XMonad set, and we're good to go from there. One extra thing I do here on Xorg is I set the display manager.session commands explicitly, and I tell it to set my wallpaper like so. And this would be something similar to what you would put in an xinit.rc type of file. And for some of these extra packages here, I am going to grab Alacrity, but feel free to choose your terminal of choice here. I'm also going to get XMobar here for the bar and the Haskell language server. That's going to be an LSP for when I edit the files. And I'm also going to use dmenu. Now I actually have a custom dmenu override option, so I'm not going to put that here. But if you want to use dmenu or rofi or what have you, you'd want to put that here so that it gets installed. And once you've modified that file, you can simply run sudo nixos rebuild switch. And for me, I'm using Flakes, so I'm going to --flake dot, and I'll specify the host name here. This is NixOS, by the way. And there we go. So once you've installed XMonad, it's as simple as getting back to your display server. And I'm going to do that by killing DWM. And there we go, I'm right here. And I've got XMonad listed in my display manager. So we can just jump right into it. And there we go, there's the wallpaper set from my session commands. Now in XMonad, the default bind to open a terminal is going to launch Xterm, but I don't want to launch Xterm at all. I'm just going to use dmenu to open a different terminal. And the default bind for dmenu is Alt-P. And I'll just type Alacrity here. And there we go. Beautiful XMonad terminal. So after installing XMonad successfully and launching a terminal, we are going to jump straight into the config file and start tinkering with it. So let's make sure we have that directory here. It's mkdir-p.config xmonad. And let's actually open up that directory here with NeoVim. Now inside of this directory, we'll just make one file, call it xmonad.hs. And here we are, we're into our Haskell XMonad configuration file. So let's start with the absolute minimum XMonad configuration. This is gonna be a complete working config that does nothing more than launch XMonad with default settings. So it's gonna do nothing different than what we already have. But just to confirm that that default config is gonna work, let's type import XMonad at the top here. And we'll do main equals XMonad def. So that's going to be the default there. And that is it. Now, the default keybind to recompile is super Q, but first time we do it, let's actually do it manually. Let's just type XMonad -- recompile. And there we go, compiled successfully. Now we just need to restart it, which is XMonad -- restart. And to get a list of all these arguments, you can just do XMonad -- help. And here you go. This is what we've got available to us. So let's test to see if that worked here. We're gonna do, this is gonna be a flashbang warning. I'm gonna do Alt-Shift-Enter. Yep, there we go. Let's get rid of that immediately with Alt-Shift-C. So that works, the default binds are all working. And that being said, let's immediately go back into that file and start tinkering with it. So it's gonna be right here, xmonad.hs. All right, so let's jump back into this config file and build it up piece by piece here. So let's add to this here. We're gonna do mod mask equals mod for mask. And that's going to set our mod key to super instead of alt, which is pretty much standard for me. And let's change our terminal to alacrity. We'll go ahead and close out that record. Now a record in Haskell is similar to something like a struct, just contains a named field. So we've got mod mask and we're setting that to mod for mask, and then terminal, we're setting that to alacrity. So don't be afraid of this syntax, just kind of follow along with me and I'll explain as I build it. Let's go ahead and save this file here. And the default keybind for recompile and restart is mod Q. So we're gonna do alt Q right now. Looks like no errors, which means it worked. To test that, we should be able to hold super and hit shift enter and another alacrity should spawn. Boom, there we go. So we can close that out with super shift C. So we've successfully changed our mod key. We successfully changed our default terminal to alacrity. Let's keep going. So we're gonna go ahead and add some additional keybinds here. And in order to do that, we need to import xmonad.util.easyconfig. And we're going to import this function additional keys p. And let's go ahead and define our keys here. We'll do my keys equals, and we'll make it a list of tuples here. So we're gonna do super return. M is for mod key. So in our situation, mod key is super. And then we're gonna make that spawn alacrity. And we'll go ahead and also do mod D, and that's gonna spawn D menu run here. In my case, if you're using Rofi, you can swap this out with Rofi D run here. And we'll close that list out for now. And since we're using a real language, we can actually leverage function composition here with this $sign. We can use this $sign to avoid parentheses and then pipe our config through additional keys P to add our keybinds before passing the final config to XMonad. And there we go. Looks pretty clean to me, and I think it's time for a recompile. So let's do super Q, and there we go, no errors. So now in theory, super enter should, there it is, spawn a terminal. And super D should spawn D menu. There we go, perfect. Let's add some more options here. So I don't like super Q as my bind to restart and recompile XMonad. I'd prefer that to be super shift R. So we are going to actually leverage monadic chaining, which is something that makes Haskell very powerful and other functional programming languages. So here I'm going to do mod capital S for shift R, and that'll be spawn XMonad recompile. And then we're going to chain on spawn XMonad restart with this double angle bracket operator. And what this basically is saying is do the first action, spawn recompile, and then if it's true, do the second one in the XMonad. And we can basically compose these monadic actions cleanly without running into insane callbacks or messy imperative code. And one more bind while we're in here. Now that I've unbinded super Q, I can rebind super Q to kill, which is my preferred bind to kill programs. All right. So let's recompile and restart one more time with super Q. All right, so now in theory, we can spawn a terminal here and close it with super Q, and there we go. So those binds have been updated. Let's move on to some actual ricing here, some graphical updates. All right, so let's go ahead and add some graphical updates here. We're going to append this record here. And beautiful thing about the syntax here is that the comma is at the beginning of the line. So when you yank and paste that line, you get the comma, just as if it was at the end. Now you might think, well, that's the same thing if it's at the end, no problem, right? But it is a problem in certain languages that don't allow commas to be trailing. So this way you're gonna see this comma at the beginning of the line in XMonad or Haskell in general. So let's actually set the border width to 2 here. And let's do normal border color. And for my situation, I'm gonna use a Tokyo Night background color, which is 444B6A. And for the focused border color, we'll do AD8EE6. For that purple, we can go ahead and recompile here with super shift R. And I'm going to leave this in the video. I don't want to edit any of this stuff out because this is part of the debugging process. Haskell's error reporting system is very verbose and very easy to understand. It tells us that we have a compiler error here saying that the record field border width is not in scope. Now, Obviously I can see that I made a typo there. So I'll go ahead and close these and we'll just fix that typo here to border width. And we'll try Super Shift R again. And there we go. We see the XMonad compiled correctly and we do have that purple border. So spawn a couple terminals here. Yeah, there we go. Looking pretty good. So sometimes I make mistakes and I edit them out of the video, but very important for this video to leave that in just to show you how easy it is to backtrace the XMonad config. But yeah, let's move on here. Let's actually add some spacing here. So we'll go ahead and do import xmonad.layout.spacing. I'm going to make a layout hook here using function composition again. Spacing with edge is going to be 3. Pose that into the layout hook default. And now I can add that layout hook here. So what that's going to do, I'll show you what that does here. As I recompile here, we do see we have 3 pixels here on the sides. What that does for me is that tells me, or tells XMonad really, that when I have multiple terminals opened or more than one window open, there is a gap with the spacing or the gaps feature, but there is not one when I just have one window open. In order to bypass that, I'm going to do spacing with edge and put that into the layout hook. So we'll go ahead and move on to XMobar, because right now we've got a semi-working config, but we've got no bar. We can switch workspaces here. We see 2, 3, 4, etc. So I'll open some terminals here and you guys can see we can move tags, but we don't have any visual indicator on what tag we're on. So let's go ahead and set that up with a bar here. We're going to use XMobar today. Quite a bit of boilerplate to get this set up. So let's actually add a very minimal XMobar configuration file here so that we can actually integrate XMobar with XMonad. So first we're going to do makedir-p.config XMobar, and we'll go ahead and open up .config XMobar rc. And I'm just going to do a super bare bones XMobar config here just so we can display what we've got going. So we'll do config, create a record here, font equals, let's do XFT monospace 10. Let's do 14 actually, just make it. And we'll go ahead and do background color. Let's just make that black. Let's do foreground color. Make that white. Position is going to be top. We'll do commands. That's going to be run xmonad log. And then the template will be wildcard xmonad log wildcard here. And close out that record. All right, so that's a very bare bones config here. We've got the font, background color, foreground color, position. So the command xmonad log is necessary for XMonad to actually send text to the bar based on our XMonad configuration. So it listens for things like workspace updates and what have you. And for the template, we're literally just going to put the entire log in there and we'll format that later. But yeah, this will be good enough for now. So we can actually configure this inside of XMonad. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back into the XMonad config file here. So let's first add some imports so we can actually work with the XMobar here. So we're going to need dynamic log, which will provide the workspace and window information for formatting the status bar. We're obviously going to need status bar here and manage docs so that XMonad is aware of status bars and windows don't overlap them. All right. Now let's go ahead and compose the avoid struts function into our layout hook. And that's going to tell the layout to leave space for the status bar instead of covering it. And let's get the XMobar PP defaults here and override some of them with some colors. So this will tell me that my current tag is going to be cyan, and then our hidden tags are going to be light gray color here. And then our empty workspaces are going to be more of a dark gray. So we're going to go ahead and add that status bar here. My status bar equals status bar prop XMobar, and that's going to be a pure XMobar function. That'll spawn XMobar and tell it to use my color scheme. And then we need to compose with EasySB my status bar define toggle struts key. That's going to wrap our config with the status bar integration from above here. We're going to do with EasySB my status bar default toggle struts key, and def toggle struts key is going to allow us to use a default toggle key automatically. So we'll compose that into our XMonad defaults. And we should be good to go. Now, if we just save this file here and we recompile it, boom, there we go. We've got our super minimal XMobar here, and we do see those colors reflected here. So workspaces or tags 5 through 9 are empty, and then 4 and 3 and 2 still have those terminals on them. And the active workspace is cyan. So there we go. We've already got some good progress here. So let's move into the next step. All right, so let's actually customize this bar a little bit, and then I'll just show you my full customized bar at the end of it. To get into that file, let's go back here and do :e.config XMobar XMobar-rc. So let's actually change a couple things in this bar to make it look a little bit better. So I've changed the background and the foreground to the Tokyo Night backgrounds and foregrounds, but that's not quite enough. I think we also want to add a couple settings here. So let's do this. Let's do top size C130 to increase the size of the bar. And let's add a border here. That's going to be at the bottom. We'll do border color. And let's make it that purple from the XMonad border. So let's see what that looks like here. Okay, nice. Bar's a little bit bigger. We've got that tiny border, which is good. Let's make that border width equal to 2. And let's change this font here. It's going to be that JetBrains Mono bold. And there we go. We're already looking pretty clean here. So obviously this is a very bare bones minimal config. We've got a bar. We've got some decent keybinds here, but we can definitely go a lot better with this. What we can do is we can add widgets in the form of commands here. So like I said, we can definitely go more extensible with this, and I've already done so. I'm going to import my entire config here. So what I've done is added a couple widgets on the top right. It's going to be the CPU widget, the memory widget, the battery widget, right? And this is all very verbose, but you can look at the documentation for XMobar. It's really, really good documentation. It's basically just Haskell documentation. But yeah, this is kind of how I set this up here. And for the template, this is how I arranged it. So we got the log on the left, and then we're going to do some spaces. We've got the CPU widget, memory, the battery, etc. So that's going to be that. Let's go ahead and reload our config here and see if that works. And there we go. Super clean here. Couple more things to take care of here. I don't like the fact that it says spacing tall, but yeah, definitely looking a lot cleaner now, and we can kind of move on to the next step here, which is the rest of the XMonad configuration itself. So I'm going to do the same thing here and just import my config here and just explain kind of what I've added. So it's a bit of a long config, 182 lines. But yeah, we've got the colors instantiated here, got the width, border, etc. Workspaces are defined here in case we do want to change them later. Mod mask, terminal. I've got ST set here. I'll change that back to Alacrity. They both work though. We've got some function composition here. We're going to rename tall to just tall. So instead of spacing tall, it's just going to say tall, wide, full, spiral, etc. So we've got some window rules here, and this is sort of matching my DWM config. I've got two browsers. I use Firefox and Brave, and I like to open them on different tags or workspaces, I guess, which would be what you call them in XMonad. So we're going to have that logic here, compose all. Here's that record, and here's that monadic chaining that we discussed before. Now, insert position below newer is basically so that when I add a new terminal or a new window, it comes below the master of the stack. It's kind of how I like to run things here. And below here, I've got a bunch of keybinds here, gaps, etc. So basically, this is almost a one-to-one keybind map for my DWM config. And yeah, so let's go ahead and recompile that. Perfect. Now we've got the master stack correctly here. We can see that everything's attaching below, and we can cycle layouts here with super N to wide. It's monad wide, and then full screen is exactly what you'd expect. Just spawns everything on top of each other. It's monocle mode. And then spiral is that dwindle, Fibonacci, if you will. So there we go. We can swap positions of these with Super Shift J, Super Shift K, etc. Easily move them around and then quit them as needed. So yeah, we've got pretty much a daily drivable setup here. We've even got Rofi over D menu here, which is going to be good for us. Super minimal setup here. As you can see, I only have like 9 programs installed, but yeah. So this is the setup here. We've got terminals able to spawn with super enter. We can open up Firefox, and that'll always open on tag 3 here. We can toggle the gaps with super A, toggle the layouts with super N here. This is a very honest functional X11 window manager here, and we've got it running under about 13 megs, so pretty good. XMobar is taking about 30 megs, so not the greatest, but it's something. Again, nothing compares to OXWM at this point, but it's decent. So at this point, the world is really your oyster. I mean, XMonad is written in Haskell, so if you know Haskell, you can literally do anything you want with this window manager, which is the beauty of it. But you don't need to know Haskell to set this up. It just helps a little bit. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. And as always, if you have any questions or would like to see any Linux or free and open source software related content, just drop a comment and I'll put it in the pipeline. And this would not be a proper video without an obligatory Neofetch.